I called Dr. Chen about Chloe's letter. For the first time, there was no manipulation, no excuses, just raw accountability. But I was terrified it was another trick. Recovery is a process, Dr. Chen said. 14 months is significant, but it's early. If you open the door, do it slowly with clear boundaries. For 6 weeks, I read that letter every morning, analyzing every word for hidden manipulation. I found none. Finally, I wrote back 3 sentences thanking her for her honesty, but saying I wasn't ready. 2 days later, Chloe texted, "Thank you for responding. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when and if you're ever ready." That restraint, that respect for my boundaries meant more than any apology ever could. Meanwhile, the Eleanor Mitchell Financial Literacy Center expanded to 3 locations. We were helping hundreds of young people learn to manage money, set boundaries, and protect themselves from financial abuse. I hired full-time staff, developed partnerships with schools, and gave talks at conferences. Slowly, I built a life that was fully mine. I also started dating. His name was David, a teacher at one of our partner high schools. He was kind, patient, and had his own history of setting boundaries with toxic family. He understood why I didn't talk to my parents and never asked me for money. On our 3rd date, I told him everything. I waited for judgment for him to say I'd been too harsh. Instead, he took my hand. That must have been incredibly hard. But you protected yourself. That takes real strength. I cried right there in that restaurant. Because for the first time, someone saw my boundaries not as cruelty, but as survival. 18 months after cutting off my family, I was invited to speak at a national conference on financial literacy. The venue was a huge hotel ballroom in Boston, with over 500 people in attendance. I stood at the podium looking out at all those faces and felt the weight of my grandmother's legacy settling on my shoulders like a warm blanket. "I want to tell you about pizza," I began, and I saw some confused smiles in the audience. Not because I'm hungry, though the conference lunch was hours ago, but because pizza taught me everything I know about protecting yourself financially and emotionally. I shared my grandmother's metaphor, explaining how we slice up our resources and how important it is to guard those slices from people who would take them all. And then taking a deep breath, I shared my story. Not all of it, but enough. The inheritance, the attempted theft, the difficult decision to cut ties with my family. "I'm not telling you this to bash my family," I said. "I'm telling you because so many people face the same dilemma. How do you help the people you love without destroying yourself? How do you set boundaries without feeling like a terrible person? How do you protect your pizza?" The response was overwhelming. After my talk, dozens of people lined up to speak with me. They shared their own stories of family members who treated them like ATMs of parents, who stole their identities to open credit cards of siblings, who expected them to fund entire households. And almost all of them asked the same question: how did you find the strength to say no? "I didn't find it," I told them honestly. "My grandmother gave it to me. She showed me through her actions that love and boundaries can coexist. That protecting yourself isn't selfish. That you can care about someone and still refuse to let them destroy you." One woman, probably in her 50s, grabbed my hands with tears in her eyes. "I've been supporting my adult children for 20 years, she said. "They're 40 and 42, and they still live in my house, don't work, and expect me to pay for everything. I thought I was being a good mother, but after hearing you, I realize I've been enabling them. I've been teaching them that they don't have to be responsible because mom will always fix everything." "It's not too late," I told her. "It's never too late to set boundaries." "But what if they hate me?" she asked, voicing the fear I'd lived with for so long. "Then they hate you," I said gently. "But at least you'll be free, and maybe, just maybe, being forced to stand on their own will be the best thing that ever happened to them." Flying home from Boston, I thought about that woman and wondered if she'd actually do it. If she'd find the courage to set boundaries with her adult children. I hoped she would. I hoped my story had given her permission to choose herself. When I got home, there was a package waiting outside my apartment door. No return address, just my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. For a moment, I felt that old fear spike. Was this from Marco? Had he gotten out on bail? But when I opened it carefully inside, I found a small ceramic sculpture. It was a pizza divided into 8 perfect slices, each slice a different color. And underneath was a note in Chloe's handwriting. "I made this in my ceramics class. I'm taking night classes at community college now, working toward a degree in accounting." Ironic, right? The gambling addict studying finance. But my sponsor says I need to face my demons, and numbers are definitely one of my demons. This pizza reminded me of your talks about Grandma's lessons. I know I took too many of your slices for too long. I'm working on earning my own pizza now. I hope you like it. No pressure to respond. Just wanted you to know I'm still trying. Chloe. I set the ceramic pizza on my kitchen counter next to the succulent David had given me and the photo of Grandma Eleanor at my college graduation. It looked right there, part of this new life I was building. That night, I sent Chloe a photo of the pizza in its new home with a simple caption, "It's perfect. Thank you." She responded with a smiley face emoji, nothing more, just acknowledgement. Respect for my boundaries, even as she tried to build a bridge back to me. 2 years after my grandmother's death, the Eleanor Mitchell Financial Literacy Center won a national award for community impact. We'd helped over 2,000 young people learn about money management. We'd prevented countless cases of financial abuse. We'd given kids the tools to protect themselves. At the award ceremony in Washington, D.C., they asked me to give a speech. I stood on that stage wearing the pearl necklace my grandmother had left me, and I told the story of the pizza one more time. My grandmother understood something that took me 30 years to learn, I said. She understood that you can't pour from an empty cup, that you can't give away every slice of your pizza and expect to survive, that loving yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. After the ceremony, I called my mother. It was the first time I'd initiated contact in 2 years. She answered on the first ring, her voice breathless with hope and fear. Ava. Hi, Mom, I said. I'm in D.C. I just won an award for the center, the Eleanor Mitchell Financial Literacy Center. I wanted you to know. There was silence on the other end, and then I heard her crying. Your grandmother would be so proud, she finally said. I'm so proud. I'm not ready to see you, I said quickly before she could ask. I'm not ready for family dinners or holidays or any of that. But I wanted to tell you about the award. Because it's Grandma's legacy as much as mine. I understand, my mother said. Thank you for calling. Thank you for sharing this with me. We talked for 10 more minutes. She told me about my father's new job, about how he'd finally found work as a consultant for small businesses, helping them avoid the financial mistakes he'd made. She told me about Chloe's progress, how she was about to finish her associate's degree. She didn't ask for money, she didn't guilt me. She just shared mother to daughter, and for the first time in my life, it felt almost normal. When I hung up, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there. 3 years after the confrontation in Sterling's office, I had coffee with Chloe. Just coffee in a public place with a clear time limit. She looked healthy, strong, completely different from the desperate, sweating woman who'd tried to steal from me. I'm 3 years sober, she told me, stirring sugar into her coffee. I got my bachelor's degree in accounting. I have a job at a small firm. I have my own apartment. I pay all my own bills, and I go to GA meetings 3 times a week, every week, no matter what. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. I don't expect you to forget what I did. Chloe continued, looking me in the eye. I stole from you for years. I sold you out to a loan shark. I tried to manipulate you, guilt you, use you. I destroyed our relationship. That's on me. Yes, it is, I agreed. But I want you to know that I'm different now, she said. Not fixed. Addiction doesn't work that way. But managing, growing, trying to be someone you might someday want to know. I see that, I said. This coffee, this conversation, it's a start. Just a start, Chloe agreed. I'm not asking for more than you're ready to give. Whatever relationship we have going forward, it'll be on your terms. Because I finally understand that's how it should have always been. We talked for an hour. She told me about her job, her sponsor, her goals. I told her about the center, about David, about my work. It wasn't the sister relationship we'd had as children before jealousy and addiction and money had poisoned everything. But it was something new, something honest, something that might eventually grow into something real. When we parted ways, she hugged me briefly, and I let her. Baby steps. Boundaries with slowly opening doors. Today, 4 years after my grandmother's death, I run the Eleanor Mitchell Financial Literacy Center full-time. We have 5 locations now serving communities across 3 states. We've helped over 5,000 young people learn to manage their money, set boundaries, and protect themselves from financial abuse. David and I moved in together last year. We're talking about marriage, about maybe starting a family someday. The idea terrifies me a little because I know how badly family can hurt. But David reminds me that we get to choose what kind of family we create. We get to break the cycles. I see my parents twice a year now. Thanksgiving and Christmas at neutral locations with clear boundaries about topics we don't discuss. It's not perfect. It's not a Hallmark movie reconciliation. But it's real and it's honest, and it doesn't require me to sacrifice myself. Chloe and I have coffee once a month. We text occasionally. She's 5 years sober now and has never once asked me for money. Last month, she paid for our coffee, and I saw how proud she was to be able to do that. Small victories, but they matter. My grandmother's inheritance, carefully invested, has grown. I live comfortably, but not extravagantly. Most of the money funds the center helps kids who need it, spreads the lessons Grandma taught me. Sometimes I sit in my apartment with my cat and my partner and my little ceramic pizza, and I think about how far I've come. I still have hard days. Days when I see a family laughing together in a restaurant and feel that old ache of what I've lost. Days when I wonder if I made the right choice, if there was some way I could have saved both my inheritance and my family. Days when guilt creeps in and whispers that maybe I should have just given them the money. But then I remember the forged signature, the 4 attempts at fraud, Marco standing on my doorstep making threats. The years of being used and diminished and treated as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. And I remember that I didn't choose this outcome. They did. Every time they chose money over relationship. Every time they chose manipulation over honesty. Every time they chose to take rather than to give. I chose survival. I chose self-respect. I chose a future where I wasn't constantly being drained dry by people who saw me as an A rather than a daughter, a sister, a human being worthy of love and respect. Was it worth it? The isolation, the grief, the loss of the family I'd known. I look at the teenager who stayed after class yesterday to ask how to protect herself from a boyfriend pressuring her to share her bank account password. I look at the single mother who cried when she realized she didn't have to co-sign her adult son's 3rd car loan. I look at the young man who told me that learning about financial boundaries helped him finally move out of his toxic parents' house. And I know the answer. Yes, it was worth it. Because I'm not just protecting myself anymore. I'm protecting them. I'm teaching the lessons my grandmother taught me, spreading the wisdom she spent a lifetime learning. I'm breaking cycles of financial abuse and emotional manipulation. I'm showing people that they have options, that they have worth, that saying no doesn't make them bad people. My grandmother once told me that the most powerful word in the English language was no. Not yes, not love, not even please. No, because no is the word that protects everything you hold dear. No is the word that establishes where you end and someone else begins. No is the word that separates healthy relationships from toxic ones. She was right. And now I'm teaching that lesson to everyone who walks through the doors of the center that bears her name. Last month, something remarkable happened. A young woman named Jasmine, who came to us 3 years ago drowning in debt from loans her mother had taken out in her name, graduated from our advanced program. Through what we taught her, she learned how to dispute fraudulent debts, protect her credit, rebuild her life, and set boundaries with her family. Now she's debt-free, finishing college with a degree in social work, and volunteering at the center to help others. At her graduation ceremony, she gave a speech that made everyone in the room cry. 3 years ago, I thought I was a terrible daughter, she said. My mother told me I was selfish for refusing to let her use my credit. She told me I was destroying our family. She told me that real daughters sacrifice for their mothers. And I believed her. I felt guilty every single day. She paused, wiping her eyes. But this center taught me something different. They taught me that love shouldn't cost you everything, that family doesn't mean self-destruction, that protecting yourself is an act of strength, not selfishness. They taught me about pizza. The audience laughed through their tears. And now I'm free, Jasmine continued. Free from debt, free from guilt, free to build a life that's actually mine. My mother and I don't speak anymore, and that's okay. Because I'm finally learning to be okay. And I want to help other people learn that too. She looked directly at me then. Thank you, Ava. Thank you for showing me that it's possible to survive your family and build something beautiful from the ashes. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face, knowing that this right here was my grandmother's real legacy. Not the money, not the trust fund, but the wisdom to use it well to transform pain into purpose, to turn my own healing into a lifeline for others. When I go to bed at night in my apartment that I chose with my partner, who respects me with my cat, who chose me at the shelter with my ceramic pizza, that represents reconciliation and growth, I don't feel rich. The money is there, yes, carefully invested and growing according to the plan Sterling and I developed. But it sits in the background of my life, a safety net rather than a centerpiece. What defines me now is the choice I made to value myself over their approval, the choice to protect my peace over preserving their comfort, The choice to build something meaningful from the ashes of a family that could never give me what I needed. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Not that you should cut off your family at the first sign of trouble. Not that money is more important than relationships, but that you have to protect yourself first before you can truly help anyone else. You have to put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. You have to guard your own pizza before you can share any slices. My grandmother understood that in a way my parents never did. She understood that self-sacrifice without boundaries isn't noble, it's self-destruction. She understood that you can love people and still refuse to let them destroy you. She understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to let people face the consequences of their own choices. I still think about that night when I found the forged documents in my father's office. I think about the fork in the road I stood at the choice between keeping the peace and protecting myself. And I know with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the comfortable choice, but the right one. Because I deserve better than a family that only values me for what I can give them. Because my worth isn't measured in dollars I can be manipulated into handing over. Because love should feel like coming home, not like having my pockets picked. And because my grandmother believed I deserved better, and I owe it to her memory to believe it too. So here's my message to you if you're listening to this story and seeing yourself in it. If you're the person always giving, always sacrificing, always bending yourself into shapes to fit other people's needs. If you're the one who lies awake at night wondering why your best is never good enough. If you're the one who feels guilty for wanting to protect what's yours, you deserve better. You deserve relationships that don't cost you everything you have. You deserve family that celebrates your success instead of resenting it. You deserve to keep your pizza and eat it too. And if they can't give you that, if they keep taking and taking until you have nothing left, then maybe it's time to do what I did. Maybe it's time to choose yourself. It won't be easy. There will be guilt and grief and lonely nights when you wonder if you made a terrible mistake. There will be people who don't understand, who judge you for putting yourself first. There will be moments when you question everything. But there will also be mornings when you wake up and realize you're not anxious anymore. There will be evenings when you do something just for you and don't feel guilty about it. There will be days when you look in the mirror and like the person looking back at you. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, you'll start to build a life that's actually yours. Not the life your family wanted you to have. Not the life you thought you were supposed to have. But the life you choose, the life you design, the life you protect, with boundaries and self-respect and hard-earned wisdom. That's what my grandmother gave me. Not just money, but permission. Permission to want more. Permission to expect better. Permission to say no. Permission to survive. And now I'm giving you that same permission. Take it. Use it. Protect yourself. Build something beautiful from the ashes of what hurt you. You deserve it. So I'm asking you now, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation? Have you ever had to set boundaries with people you love, even knowing they might never forgive you? What would you do in my situation? Would you have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, or if you're currently struggling with toxic family dynamics, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because the more we talk about these difficult topics, the more we normalize setting boundaries and choosing ourselves, the easier it becomes for the next person to make that hard choice. Remember, you are not responsible for other people's poor decisions. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And you are not selfish for protecting what's yours. Guard your pizza. You earned every slice. I stared at my phone screen, hands trembling so violently I almost dropped it. The notification from my bank's security system glared back at me in bold red letters. Urgent unauthorized access attempt detected. Account temporarily frozen. Legal authorities notified. But it wasn't hackers or identity thieves trying to drain my account. It was my own father and sister attempting to steal the $250,000 inheritance my grandmother had left me just 6 months ago. That text message arrived while I sat in the back of an Uber returning home from a business trip to Chicago. My stomach twisted into knots as I read the second message from my lawyer, Sterling. Ava, we need to talk immediately. Your family made their move. The security protocols worked exactly as planned. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more about standing up for yourself and breaking free from toxic relationships, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me about a time you had to set boundaries with someone you loved. Your support means everything, and I read every single comment. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare truly began. 3 weeks earlier, I had walked through the door of my childhood home in the suburbs of New York, exhausted from a grueling work trip. I'd been in Chicago for 5 days straight, closing a major deal for the marketing firm, where I worked as a senior account executive. The project had consumed every waking hour, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed and sleep for 12 hours straight. But the moment I stepped inside the house, something felt profoundly wrong. The air was thick with tension, like the oppressive humidity before a thunderstorm. Every instinct I'd honed over 30 years of navigating my family's dysfunction started screaming at me to turn around and leave. My father, Richard, was pacing in his study, visible through the partially open door. His voice was sharp and aggressive as he spoke into his phone, and I could hear the desperation underneath the anger. "I told you we'll have it by Friday. I just need a few more days to work out the logistics." "No, you don't understand. I have access to the funds. It's just a matter of transferring them properly." I froze in the hallway, my suitcase still in hand. Who was he talking to? What funds was he referring to? A cold dread started spreading through my chest. My mother, Helen, appeared in the hallway, and the smile she gave me was so forced it looked painful. Her hands were shaking as she reached out to hug me, and I could feel the tension in her body like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. "Ava, sweetheart, you're home," she said, her voice pitched too high, too bright. "We're so glad you're here. We've missed you terribly. How was Chicago?" "Did the presentation go well? You must be exhausted. Come, sit down. I made your favorite pot roast for dinner." The words tumbled out too fast, tripping over each other. My mother had always been anxious, always desperate to smooth over conflict and maintain the appearance of family harmony. But this was different. This was panic barely held in check. My sister Chloe sat at the dining table, her eyes glued to her phone screen. Even from across the room, I could see the sheen of perspiration on her forehead and upper lip, despite the fact that the air conditioning was running full blast. Her leg bounced incessantly under the table, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood, whenever she was in trouble. Her fingers flew across her phone screen, typing frantically, then deleting, then typing again. "Hey sis," she said without looking up, her voice strained. "Welcome back." I set my suitcase down slowly, my mind racing. Something was very, very wrong here, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Not yet. Dinner that night was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life, and that's saying something given my family's long history of dysfunctional meals. We sat around the table in near silence, the only sounds being the clinking of silverware against plates and my father's heavy breathing. The pot roast sat in the center of the table, slowly congealing, barely touched. I watched them all, carefully cataloging every nervous gesture, every furtive glance. My mother pushed food around her plate without actually eating anything, her eyes darting between my father and Chloe like she was watching a tennis match. Chloe's leg continued its relentless bouncing, and she checked her phone obsessively, her face going pale every time it buzzed with a new notification. My father kept glancing at his watch every few minutes, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. "So," I said, breaking the oppressive silence, "what's been going on while I was away? Anything interesting happen?" The reaction was immediate and telling. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide. My father's face flushed an angry red. "Nothing," my father said curtly. "Everything's fine, just the usual." But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. And they all knew that I knew it. After dinner, I excused myself, saying I needed to grab my phone charger from my car. But as I walked toward the front door, I remembered that I'd left a backup charger in my father's study years ago, back when I still lived at home. It would save me a trip outside in the cold. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet, and pushed open the door to his office. The room was dimly lit by a single desk lamp, casting long shadows across the mahogany furniture that my parents had bought during better financial times. The air smelled of old leather and my father's cologne scents that had once meant safety and home, but now just made my stomach churn with anxiety. And there, spread across my father's desk in chaotic disarray, was a stack of legal documents. I shouldn't have looked. I should have just grabbed the charger and left. But something made me pause. Some instinct, some sixth sense developed over years of being the responsible daughter who had to clean up everyone else's messes. The top document caught my eye immediately. It was a property transfer form, officially stamped and notarized. And there at the bottom was a signature that was supposed to be mine, except I had never signed it. The forgery was clumsy, amateurish even. My actual signature had a distinctive loop in the capital A and a specific flourish at the end that this fake version completely missed. Whoever had forged it hadn't even bothered to practice first. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked up the document with shaking hands. This wasn't just about property. As I scanned the text, I realized what this was. It was an authorization form to transfer funds from my trust account, the account that held my grandmother Eleanor's inheritance, the money she'd saved and invested carefully over decades, the inheritance she'd specifically designated for me and only me. The amount listed made my blood run cold. $250,000. What are you doing in here? I spun around to find my father standing in the doorway, his face flushed purple with rage. Chloe stood just behind him, her eyes wide with something between fear and defiance. The overhead light flicked on harsh and revealing, and I saw my father more clearly than I had in years. His suit was rumpled and stained. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. "This is my signature," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. I held up the document, watching their faces carefully. On a legal document I never sign. Want to explain what's going on here? My father lunged forward and snatched the papers from my hands with such violence that the edges tore. "This is my private office. You have no right to go through my things. No right at all. Get out." "I have every right when you're forging my signature on legal documents." I shot back, feeling something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. This wasn't shock anymore. This was clarity. "This is about Grandma Eleanor's money, isn't it? You're trying to steal my inheritance." Chloe stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness, the same manipulative tone she'd been using on me since we were children. "God, Ava, you're so dramatic. You always have to make everything into some big production. Dad was just helping me with some paperwork. You're always so busy with your important job and your important life in the city. We thought we'd handle the tedious legal stuff for you. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? We're family. We're supposed to help each other." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw the desperation in her eyes, the dark circles underneath barely concealed by makeup, the way her hands trembled, the sheen of sweat on her skin despite the cold air. This wasn't just about greed. This was about something deeper, something darker. But in that moment, I didn't care about the reasons. I only cared about the fact that they had tried to steal from me. "Get out of my office," my father said again, his voice low and dangerous. "Now." I turned and walked out without another word. My mind was racing connections, forming pieces clicking into place. As I walked back to the dining room, I thought about all the little things I'd noticed over the past few months. The way Chloe had been calling me more often than usual, always with some excuse to ask about my finances. The way my father had suddenly become interested in the details of Grandma's trust fund. The way my mother had been even more anxious and clingy than normal. They'd been planning this. For how long I didn't know. But this wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was premeditated theft. I returned to the dining room and sat back down at my place. My mother looked at me with pleading eyes, but I ignored her. Inside, my mind was churning through everything I knew about the security measures my grandmother and I had set up together during her final months. Grandma Eleanor had been sharp until the very end, even as cancer ravaged her body. She had insisted on the most sophisticated protection possible for my inheritance. Any transaction from my account required voice authentication and a personal code that only I knew. Any attempt to access the account without proper authorization would immediately freeze it and send alerts to my lawyer Sterling and the authorities. She had been paranoid about it, actually spending hours with Sterling and the bank's security team to ensure that every possible loophole was closed. At the time, I thought she was being overly cautious. Now I understood. She had known this day would come. She had seen my family's true nature more clearly than I ever had. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip, allowing myself a small, cold smile. They had no idea what they were walking into. The security system my grandmother had put in place was virtually impenetrable. Let them try. Let them show me exactly who they really were. The meal continued in suffocating silence. I could feel their eyes on me, trying to gauge my reaction, trying to figure out if I suspected anything. My mother made several attempts at conversation, asking about my trip, commenting on the weather, mentioning a neighbor's new baby. Each attempt fell flat, dying in the thick tension that filled the room. Chloe excused herself twice to go to the bathroom, and each time I heard her voice through the door, low and urgent, talking to someone on her phone. My father received 3 phone calls during dinner, each time stepping out of the room to answer his voice, growing more agitated with each conversation. After dinner, I excused myself and went upstairs to my old bedroom. The room hadn't changed much since I'd moved out 8 years ago. My debate team trophies still lined the bookshelf. My high school yearbooks sat in a neat row. The walls were still painted the soft blue I'd chosen when I was 16. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking as I dialed Sterling's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice instantly alert despite the late hour. "Ava," he said. "I was hoping you'd call. I received an alert about 30 minutes ago. Someone attempted to access your account using forged authorization documents." "It was my family," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "My father and sister. I found the paperwork in his office. They forged my signature on a transfer form. Sterling, they're trying to steal $250,000 from me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear papers rustling. "The security system worked perfectly," Sterling said. "The moment the bank received the documents, their fraud detection system flagged the signature as potentially forged. They ran it through verification protocols, and when it failed, the system automatically locked down the account and sent alerts to both my office and the Financial Crimes Unit. They can't touch a penny without your explicit authorization." I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and nauseating betrayal. "Thank you, Sterling. Thank you for everything." "But Ava, I have to ask," Sterling continued, his voice serious. "What do you want to do about this? This isn't just family drama. This is fraud, identity theft, forgery. These are serious crimes. We could pursue criminal charges. I have more than enough evidence to ensure convictions." I sat there in the darkness of my childhood bedroom, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. These were my parents, my sister. Despite everything, despite years of being treated like an afterthought, despite being the family's perpetual problem solver, an aching part of me still wanted to believe there was some explanation, some reason that would make this all make sense. "Let them keep trying," I finally said. "I want to see how far they'll go. Don't shut them down yet. Document everything, every attempt, every phone call, every forged document. But I need to know the full extent of this. I need to understand what I'm really dealing with here." "Are you sure?" Sterling asked, concern evident in his voice. "Ava, if they're desperate enough to attempt fraud, there's no telling what else they might do. This could escalate. You could be in danger." "I'm sure," I said, even though I wasn't sure of anything anymore. "Just keep monitoring everything. Every move they make, I want to know about it." "I'll have my team set up comprehensive surveillance on all your accounts," Sterling said. "And Ava, I think it's time you knew something else. Your grandmother asked me to compile background information on your family members before her death. She wanted to know exactly what she was protecting you from." My stomach dropped. "What did you find?" "I'm sending you an encrypted file now," Sterling said. "But Ava, you need to prepare yourself. What your grandmother discovered about Chloe's financial situation is significantly worse than what your family has told you." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness and waited for the file to arrive. When my phone buzzed with the notification, I opened it with trembling hands. What I saw made me feel physically sick. Credit card debt, $73,000 across 12 different cards, most of them maxed out. Personal loans from predatory lenders, another $32,000, with interest rates approaching 40%. And then there were the wire transfers, hundreds of them going to offshore gambling sites, sports betting, online casinos, poker rooms. The amounts ranged from a few $100s to several thousand, and they stretched back over 3 years. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the names at the bottom of the report: Marco Castellano, Vincent Russo, Anthony DeLuca. These weren't just gambling sites. These were loan sharks, organized crime. And next to Marco's name was a number that made my blood run cold: $150,000 outstanding. I scrolled through page after page of documentation. Threatening emails, text messages demanding payment, records of Chloe's increasingly desperate attempts to borrow money from friends, ex-boyfriends, distant relatives. And then I found the co-signer documents. My parents had guaranteed several of Chloe's loans, putting their own assets up as collateral. The house I'd grown up in, my father's struggling business. Everything they owned was now at risk because of Chloe's gambling addiction. Suddenly, everything made sense. The desperation, the forgery, the tension at dinner. They weren't just being greedy, they were terrified. They had bet everything on being able to access my inheritance, and now they were facing financial ruin. I should have felt sympathy. I should have felt compassion for my family's desperate situation. But all I felt was a cold, hard anger. Because instead of coming to me honestly, instead of asking for help, instead of admitting the problem and seeking treatment for Chloe's addiction, they had chosen to steal from me. They had chosen lies and fraud and forgery. I spent that night lying awake in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through scenarios and possibilities. Every time I started to drift off, I would remember some other incident from my past that suddenly made sense in this new context. The time Chloe had borrowed my laptop, and I'd found gambling sites in the browser history. The time my father had asked detailed questions about how quickly I could access my trust fund. The time my mother had cried and begged me to understand that Chloe was going through a hard time and needed family support. How long had they known? How long had they been planning to use me as their solution to a problem they'd helped create? The next morning, I came downstairs to find my mother alone in the kitchen, making coffee with shaking hands. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. "Ava, honey," she started, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said quietly. "Just don't." "You don't understand," she said, tears already starting to fall. "Chloe's in trouble, real trouble. We're trying to protect her. We're trying to protect this family. If you would just listen." "I found the documents, Mom," I interrupted. "I know about the forgery. I know you're trying to steal from me. So please don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about protection." She sank into a chair, sobbing openly now. "We were going to pay you back. I swear we were going to pay you back. We just needed to handle some things first. Get Chloe out of trouble, and then we would explain everything. We didn't want to worry you. You're always so busy with work." "You didn't want to worry me," I repeated slowly, feeling that cold anger solidify into something harder, sharper. "So instead you decided to commit fraud, to forge my signature, to steal $250,000. That was your solution to not wanting to worry me." "It's not stealing," she protested. "It's family money. Your grandmother would have wanted you to help your sister. She would have wanted you to protect Chloe." "Grandma Eleanor didn't leave the money to Chloe," I said. "She left it to me, specifically to me. And if she'd wanted Chloe to have it, she would have put her name on the trust. But she didn't, did she? And I think we both know why." My mother's face crumpled, and she buried her face in her hands. I stood there watching her cry, and I felt nothing but numbness. All my life I'd been conditioned to comfort her, to make things better, to sacrifice my own needs for the sake of family peace. But I couldn't do it anymore. I wouldn't do it anymore. I left the house that morning and went to Sterling's office, where we spent 3 hours reviewing every security measure in place. The protection was extensive biometric authentication, multiple verification steps, automatic alerts for any suspicious activity, and a team of lawyers ready to pursue legal action if necessary. My grandmother had thought of everything. "There's something else you should know," Sterling said, sliding another folder across his desk toward me. "We've been monitoring your sister's movements as part of the standard background check. Yesterday, she met with Marco Castellano at a restaurant in Manhattan. Our investigator got photos." I opened the folder and found myself looking at surveillance photos of Chloe sitting across from a man in an expensive suit. Even in the grainy images, I could see the fear on my sister's face, the way she twisted her napkin in her hands, the way she leaned forward desperately as she talked. "According to our lip-reading expert," Sterling continued, "she was begging for more time, promising him that she would have the money by the end of the week. She told him that her sister had come into a large inheritance and that she was working on accessing it. So they had already promised my money to a loan shark. They had already committed it without my knowledge or permission to pay off Chloe's gambling debts. What happens if they can't pay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sterling's expression was grave. "Based on Marco Castellano's reputation, nothing good. He's connected to the Russo crime family. They're not known for their patience or forgiveness." Over the next few days, I watched my family spiral. They didn't know that I knew about the failed fraud attempt. They didn't know that Sterling's team was documenting every move they made, and they kept digging themselves deeper. I received texts from Chloe, casual at first, asking how I was doing, mentioning that she might need to borrow some money soon for a car repair. When I didn't respond encouragingly, the texts became more frequent, more desperate. Then she started calling, leaving rambling voicemails about family loyalty and how sisters were supposed to help each other. My father left me a message saying he wanted to discuss my financial future and suggesting I might want to diversify some of my assets. My mother sent long emails about how proud Grandma Eleanor would be of me for helping Chloe through this difficult time. They were coordinating their efforts, trying different angles, seeing which approach might work. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. On the 4th day after I discovered the forged documents, something happened that changed everything. I was working from home trying to focus on a presentation for work when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the sudden intrusion made my heart skip. Through the peephole, I saw a man I'd never seen before. He was impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, his dark hair slicked back perfectly, his posture radiating confidence and menace in equal measure. Everything about him screamed danger. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. "Ava Mitchell. My name is Marco Castellano. I'm a friend of your sister Chloe. Is she here by any chance?" My mouth went dry. This was him, the loan shark, the man Chloe owed $150,000 to, standing on my doorstep in broad daylight in my nice suburban neighborhood. "No, she doesn't live here," I managed to say. "I think you have the wrong address." "Oh, I don't think so," Marco said, his smile widening. His teeth were very white, very straight, very expensive looking. "Chloe's told me so much about you, about your close relationship, about your family, about your dear grandmother who recently passed away, and left you quite comfortable financially." I started to close the door, but Marco held up a hand in a placating gesture. "Please, Miss Mitchell, just give me a moment of your time. I think we have some mutual interests to discuss." "I don't think we have anything to discuss," I said, my hand on the door, ready to slam it shut. "Chloe owes me money," Marco said, dropping all pretense of friendliness. His voice turned cold businesslike. "Quite a lot of money. She's been very creative in finding ways to delay payment, but my patience isn't infinite. She told me that you've recently come into a substantial inheritance. She said you'd be willing to help family in need, that you're a generous person, a loyal sister." "Chloe lied to you," I said flatly. "I'm not paying her debts." Marco's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That would be unfortunate for Chloe, for your parents who co-signed some of her loans, for your entire family, really. These kinds of debts have a way of affecting everyone involved." "Is that a threat?" I asked, feeling anger cut through my fear. "It's a statement of fact," Marco replied smoothly. "I'm a businessman, Miss Mitchell. I don't make threats. I simply collect what's owed to me. How I collect it depends entirely on the cooperation I receive. Now I understand you have access to a trust fund. $250,000 would go a long way towards settling Chloe's account. I'm willing to write off the rest as a gesture of goodwill." "Get off my property," I said, my voice shaking despite my attempt to sound firm. "Now, before I call the police." Marco reached into his jacket, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he was reaching for a weapon. But instead, he pulled out a business card, holding it up so I could see it. Of course," he said, his voice returning to that false friendliness. "I apologize if I've upset you, but do think about what I said. It would be very unfortunate if something happened to Chloe because her family refused to help her in her time of need. Very unfortunate indeed for all of you." He slid the business card through the gap in the door, and I let it fall to the floor rather than touch it. Marco tipped an imaginary hat, turned, and walked away. I watched through the peephole as he got into a black Mercedes and drove away slowly, deliberately, making sure I saw him leave. The moment he was gone, I locked the door, engaged all the deadbolts, and immediately called Sterling. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "He came to my house," I said when Sterling answered. "Marco Castellano. He came to my house and threatened me, threatened my family." "I'm calling the police right now," Sterling said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. "Stay inside, lock all your doors and windows. I'm sending someone to your location immediately." "They're not just desperate," I said, feeling tears of fear and rage burning behind my eyes. "They're terrified. Chloe's in debt to someone dangerous, and they told him about my inheritance. Sterling, they sold me out to a loan shark. Within an hour, my apartment was full of people. 2 police officers taking my statement, a private security consultant Sterling had hired. Sterling himself looking more worried than I'd ever seen him. They installed a security camera at my door. They took photos of Marco's business card, which turned out to be real, leading to a legitimate business, a consulting firm that was almost certainly a front for money laundering. "This changes everything," Sterling said after the police left. "This is no longer just about family drama or financial fraud. If Marco Castellano is involved, your family might be in real danger. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" I sat on my couch wrapped in a blanket despite the warmth of the apartment, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to help. Despite everything they'd done, they were still my family. Chloe was still my sister, even if she'd sold me out to a criminal. But another part of me, the part that my grandmother had tried to nurture and protect, knew that paying Marco wouldn't solve anything. It would just enable Chloe's addiction. It would teach my family that they could use me as their personal bailout fund. And it would put a target on my back as someone with money who could be manipulated. I want to end this, I said finally. Once and for all, but not by paying him. Set up a meeting with my family, all of them, your office, tomorrow if possible. It's time we had a conversation about what's really going on here. Are you sure you're ready for this? Sterling asked gently. Once you confront them directly, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family will never be the same. I looked at him, and I felt something inside me harden into resolve. It's already not the same. They destroyed it the moment they tried to steal from me, the moment they forged my signature, the moment Chloe told a loan shark about my inheritance. All I'm doing now is making it official. The next afternoon, I walked into Sterling's office to find my entire family already waiting. The room smelled of expensive leather and old books, and the afternoon sunlight slanted through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the conference table. My father sat ramrod straight in one of the leather chairs, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. He'd lost weight since I'd last really looked at him. His suit hung loose on his frame, and his skin had a grayish tinge that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. My mother perched on the edge of her seat, wringing her hands in her lap, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She'd aged 10 years in the past 6 months. The lines around her mouth had deepened, and her hair, which she'd always kept meticulously colored, showed gray roots. Chloe slouched in the corner, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. She looked worse than I'd ever seen her. Her skin was sallow, her eyes hollow, her clothes rumpled and stained. This wasn't just stress. This was addiction eating her alive from the inside out. Sterling had arranged everything perfectly. The large conference table was clear except for 3 manila folders placed precisely in the center. He stood at the head of the table, professional and calm, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos my family brought with them. "Thank you all for coming," Sterling began, his voice neutral and detached. "Ava has asked me to facilitate this meeting because there are some matters that need to be addressed regarding her inheritance from Eleanor Mitchell and some recent concerning activities." "What is this about?" my father demanded, cutting Sterling off. "If this is about those papers you found in my office, Ava, I can explain. There was a misunderstanding." "No," I said, my voice cutting through his excuse like a knife. I was surprised by how calm I sounded, how steady. Inside my heart was racing, but outside I was collected. "You're not going to explain anything. You're not going to make excuses. You're going to sit there and listen." My father's face flushed red with anger. "You don't talk to me like that. I'm your father." "You're a fraud," I interrupted. "You forged my signature on legal documents. You attempted to steal from me. So know you've lost the right to lecture me about respect." I moved to the table and placed my hand on the folders. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind dozens of times, but now that it was here, I found my script abandoned. The words came from somewhere deeper, somewhere raw and honest. "Let's start with you, Chloe," I said, opening the first folder and spreading its contents across the table. Bank statements, credit reports, loan documents, gambling site transaction histories, all belonging to Chloe. $73,000 in credit card debt across 12 different cards. $32,000 in personal loans with interest rates that should be illegal, and approximately $150,000 in gambling debts to various online casinos, and most significantly to Marco Castellano of the Russo crime family. Chloe's face went from pale to sheet white. "How did you get those?" she shrieked, jumping to her feet. "That's private information. You had no right. You violated my privacy." "I had every right," I replied, my voice steady. "When you and Dad tried to steal from me by forging my signature on legal documents, you made your financial situation my business. When you told Marco Castellano about my inheritance and sent him to my home to threaten me, you made it my business." "He came to your house," my mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh God. Chloe, you told him where Ava lives." Chloe's eyes darted between us, trapped and desperate. "I didn't mean for that to happen. I just mentioned that my sister might be able to help. I didn't think he'd actually go there. I didn't think—" "You didn't think," I agreed. "You haven't been thinking for 3 years based on these records. Just gambling, losing, borrowing, gambling more. And now you've dragged the entire family into your mess." My father stood up abruptly, his hands balled into fists. His face had gone from red to purple. "How dare you accuse us of anything? We're your family. Everything we've done has been to try to keep this family together. You have no idea what we've been dealing with. The stress, the pressure, the constant worry. Really? I asked, opening the second folder. My hands were steady now, my voice clear. Is that why you attempted to access my trust fund account 4 times in the last week? Is that why you submitted forged documents to my bank, claiming you had power of attorney over my accounts? Is that why you called my financial advisor pretending to be me, trying to authorize a wire transfer? I spread out the documentation Sterling's team had compiled. Every attempted access meticulously documented. Every phone call recorded and transcribed. Every fraudulent claim noted and time-stamped. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. You made 4 separate attempts to steal from me. I continued, looking at each of them in turn. 4 times you forged documents. 4 times you impersonated me. And each time you got more desperate, more sloppy. The bank's fraud detection system flagged you immediately. My father's bluster deflated slightly. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. We were going to pay you back, he said, his voice rough. Every penny, with interest. We just needed to get Marco off our backs first. Once Chloe's debts were paid, we could breathe again, think clearly, make a proper plan. But it wouldn't stop there, would it? I asked. Chloe's addiction doesn't just go away because you pay off 1 round of debts. She'd gamble again, she'd lose again, and you'd come back to me again. Except next time I'd already have established a precedent of bailing her out. Next time it would be even easier to manipulate me. We're not manipulating you, my mother cried out, tears streaming down her face. We're asking for help. We're your family. You're supposed to help family when they're in trouble. Help, I repeated, slowly tasting the word. Let me tell you about help, Mom. I was 15 when Chloe stole $600 from my savings account to buy concert tickets. You told me to forgive her because family was more important than money. I never saw that $600 again. Was that help? My mother opened her mouth to respond, but I continued. I was 19 when Dad borrowed $15,000 from my college fund because his business was struggling. He promised to pay me back with interest. That was 11 years ago. I'm still waiting. Was that help? I pulled out more documents, years of financial records that Sterling's team had compiled. When I was 22 and landed my first real job, Chloe needed money for a security deposit on an apartment. $3,000. I gave it to her. 2 months later, that apartment was gone, and so was my money. When I was 25, you needed help with property taxes. $5,000. When I was 27, Chloe's car broke down. $4,500 for repairs. I spread the papers across the table, a decade of lending that was really just giving, because not once had any of them paid me back. Over the course of 10 years, I've given this family over $50,000 of my own money, I said. Not Grandma's inheritance. My money. Money I earned from working 60-hour weeks, from skipping vacations, from living in a tiny apartment so I could save. And not once, not a single time, did any of you pay me back. Not once did any of you even thank me properly. Because somewhere along the way, my help became your expectation. My sacrifice became your entitlement. The room fell into shocked silence. Even Chloe had stopped fidgeting, staring at me with wide eyes. This isn't about keeping the family together, I continued, my voice gaining strength. This is about money, specifically my money. The inheritance that Grandma Eleanor left to me, and only me. And the reason she left it only to me is because she saw this coming. She saw exactly what would happen. I opened the third folder, and this time, my hands trembled slightly. This was the hardest part. Inside was a letter sealed and notarized, along with a video file on a USB drive that Sterling had kept in his safe. Before Grandma died, she wrote this letter, I said. She also recorded a video statement fully notarized with multiple witnesses and a doctor's certification of her mental competency. She did this specifically because she knew you would try to contest the will. She knew you would claim she was manipulated, or that I'd coerced her somehow. I began to read the letter aloud, and my voice cracked on the first few words. To my family, if you're hearing this letter, it means you've attempted to contest my will or to take from Ava what I've rightfully given her. I want you to understand why I made the choices I did. Richard, you're my son and I love you, but you're weak. You've been weak your entire life. You married Helen because she would never challenge you, never push you to be better. You raised Chloe to be entitled and spoiled because it was easier than teaching her discipline. And when Ava came along and started showing signs of actual strength and independence, you resented her for it. My father's face had gone gray. He stared at the letter like it was a snake. I watched for years as you used Ava. I continued reading. I watched as you took her money, her time, her emotional energy, and gave nothing back. I watched as you made her feel guilty for succeeding, for being responsible, for daring to have boundaries. I watched as Chloe treated Ava like a personal ATM, always taking, never giving. I watched as Helen stood by and allowed it all to happen, choosing peace over protection, choosing comfort over courage. My mother was sobbing openly now, but I forced myself to continue. I watched as Richard borrowed from his daughter's college fund and never repaid her. I watched as Chloe's gambling addiction destroyed her life, and instead of getting her help, you enabled her by constantly covering her debts. I watched as you all took advantage of Ava's kind heart, her desperate need for your approval, her willingness to sacrifice herself for this family. I looked up from the letter, meeting each of their eyes in turn. And I decided that I would not let you destroy Ava's future the way you've tried to destroy her past. I finished reading. So I created an irrevocable trust, every asset, every dollar protected by the strongest legal framework money can buy. Not because I don't love my son or my granddaughter, but because I love Ava more than I fear your anger. And because true love means protecting someone, even from their own family. The silence in the room was deafening. My father sat with his head in his hands. My mother wept quietly. Chloe stared at the floor, her face twisted with shame and rage. She knew, I said softly. She saw everything, and she protected me because you wouldn't, because you never did. Sterling cleared his throat. There's also the matter of the video statement. Would you like me to play it? Yes, I said, even though part of me wanted to spare them this final humiliation. Sterling set up his laptop and pressed play. The screen filled with an image of my grandmother sitting in her hospital bed looking directly at the camera. Despite the illness ravaging her body, her eyes were clear and sharp. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, she began, her voice strong. I am 78 years old, and I am of sound mind and body as certified by Dr. Raymond Chen, whose signature appears on this document. I am making this statement of my own free will, with no coercion or undue influence from anyone. She paused, gathering her strength. I am leaving the entirety of my estate to my granddaughter Ava Mitchell. This includes all financial assets, property, and possessions. I am doing this not out of spite or favoritism, but out of necessity. My son Richard and his family have demonstrated over many years a pattern of financial irresponsibility and emotional manipulation. They have repeatedly taken advantage of Ava's generous nature, treating her as a solution to problems they created themselves. My grandmother's voice grew stronger, more passionate. I have watched Chloe develop a gambling addiction and seen my son and daughter-in-law enable it rather than addressing it. I have watched them borrow money from Ava repeatedly without any intention of repayment. I have watched them make her feel guilty for her success and responsible for their failures. This stops now. She looked directly into the camera, and it felt like she was looking at me. Ava, if you're watching this, it means they've come after the inheritance. I need you to be strong. I need you to protect yourself. You are not responsible for fixing their mistakes. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. The money I'm leaving you is meant to give you freedom, security, and the ability to build a life on your own terms. Don't let them take that from you. Then she turned her attention back to the rest of the family. To Richard, Helen, and Chloe. I'm not cutting you off out of cruelty. I'm doing it out of tough love. You need to face the consequences of your actions. You need to solve your own problems. And you need to stop using Ava as your personal bailout fund. If you truly love her, you'll respect my wishes and leave her inheritance alone. The video ended. The room was silent except for my mother's quiet crying. $250,000, I said, breaking the silence. That was your target, wasn't it? Enough to pay off Marco and have some left over. But here's what you didn't consider. Chloe's total debts aren't $250,000. According to the documents Marco provided to Sterling's investigator, they're closer to $400,000 when you include all the interest and penalties. So even if you'd succeeded in stealing my inheritance, it wouldn't have been enough. Chloe's head snapped up. That's not true. He said $150. He promised if I got him $150, we'd be square. I almost felt sorry for her then. Almost. Marco lied, I said gently. That's what loan sharks do. They tell you one number, but the real amount is always higher. There are late fees, interest penalties, collection costs, and even if you paid the $400,000, what would stop you from gambling again? What would stop this cycle from repeating in a year, 2 years? I can stop, Chloe said desperately. I can stop anytime I want. I just need to get out from under this debt first. Once the pressure is off, once I can breathe again, I'll stop. I promise. That's what addicts always say, I replied. But addiction doesn't work that way. You need treatment, real treatment. Therapy, maybe medication, definitely a support group. Not money. Money just enables you to keep gambling. So what, you're just going to let Marco hurt me? Chloe's voice rose to a shout. You're just going to stand by and watch while they break my legs, or worse? What kind of sister are you? The kind who's finally learned that I can't save you, I said quietly. Only you can save yourself. And as long as people keep bailing you out, you'll never hit rock bottom. You'll never have to face what you've become. This is your fault, Chloe screamed, jumping to her feet. All of this is your fault. You've always been the perfect one, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. You've always made me feel like nothing, like I could never measure up. And now you're so rich and successful, and I'm drowning, and you won't even help me. Her words hit something deep inside me, some old wound I'd carried for years. For just a moment, I felt that familiar guilt rising, that voice that said maybe she was right, maybe I should help, maybe I was being selfish. But then I remembered the forged signature, the 4 attempts at fraud, Marco standing on my doorstep making threats. And I realized that Chloe's pain, while real, was not my responsibility to fix. You're right about one thing, I said. I have been successful. I've worked hard, made good choices, saved my money, and built a stable life. But that doesn't make me responsible for your failures. I didn't force you to gamble. I didn't force you to take out loans you couldn't repay. I didn't force you to lie to Marco about my inheritance. Those were your choices, Chloe. Your choices. We're family, she shouted, her voice breaking. Family helps each other. Family doesn't abandon each other. You're right again, I agreed. Family helps each other. But there's a difference between helping and enabling. There's a difference between supporting someone and letting them destroy you. And you're not asking me to help you. You're asking me to sacrifice myself for your mistakes. I turned to my parents, who had been silent throughout Chloe's outburst. And you too, I said, feeling all the anger and hurt and betrayal of 30 years rising to the surface. You co-signed her loans. You put your house up as collateral. You enabled her gambling for years rather than getting her help. And when it all came crashing down, instead of taking responsibility, instead of facing the consequences of your own choices, you decided to steal from me. My father finally looked up, and I was shocked to see tears on his face. What were we supposed to do? He asked, his voice breaking. Watch our daughter get hurt, lose our home, lose everything we've worked for. You were supposed to do the hard thing, I said. You were supposed to get Chloe into treatment years ago when the gambling first started. You were supposed to let her fail, let her face consequences, force her to get help. You were supposed to protect me instead of using me. But you didn't. You chose the easy path every single time, and now you're facing the results of those choices. So what happens now? My mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from us? I looked at Sterling, who nodded and pulled out another folder. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice hard. First, you're going to sign these documents acknowledging that you attempted fraud and agreeing to cease all contact with my financial institutions. Second, you're going to agree to a formal restraining order that prevents you from coming within 500 feet of me. Third, you're going to remove me as an emergency contact, a beneficiary, and a reference from all your accounts and documents. You're cutting us off, my father said dully. Completely. You cut yourselves off, I corrected. The moment you forged my signature. But yes, I'm making it official. I'm protecting myself, which is something I should have done years ago. What about Marco? My mother asked desperately. What about the threats? Are you really going to let something happen to Chloe? I've already reported Marco's threats to the police, I said. I've given them all the information Sterling collected about his criminal activities. They're building a case against him, but Chloe needs to cooperate. She needs to go to the police herself, tell them everything, and agree to testify against him if necessary. I can't do that, Chloe gasped. If I rat on Marco, his people will kill me. Then you have a choice to make, I said. Keep protecting a criminal and face whatever consequences come, or do the right thing and accept witness protection if necessary. But either way, I'm not giving you money to pay him off. The arguing continued for another hour. They begged, they threatened, they tried guilt, they tried anger. My father accused me of being heartless and cruel. My mother sobbed that I was destroying the family. Chloe alternated between rage and desperate pleading, but I held firm. Sterling had prepared all the legal documents, and eventually faced with the threat of criminal prosecution for fraud, they signed. They agreed to the restraining order. They agreed to leave me alone. As they filed out of the office, my mother turned back one last time. I hope you can live with yourself, she said, her voice cold. I hope you can sleep at night knowing you abandoned your family when they needed you most. I said quietly, because I'm not abandoning you. I'm finally choosing myself. And Grandma taught me that's not selfish. That's survival. The door closed behind them, and I stood in Sterling's office feeling hollowed out and exhausted. Sterling poured me a glass of water and guided me to a chair. Are you okay? He asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know. You did the right thing, he said. It was hard, but it was right. Then why do I feel so terrible? Because you're a good person, Sterling replied. Because despite everything they've done, you still love them. And that's okay. Love and boundaries can coexist. Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as my family's world fell apart. And it was brutal. Marco, frustrated by Chloe's inability to pay, escalated his collection efforts. He sent people to my parents' house at all hours. He called my father's business clients, spreading rumors about financial instability. He posted Chloe's information on certain websites, exposing her debts to public scrutiny. Terrified, Chloe finally went to the police. She told them everything about Marco, about his threats, about the whole operation. Her testimony, combined with the evidence I'd provided, gave the district attorney enough to build a case. Marco was arrested on charges of extortion, loan sharking, and money laundering. But the damage was done. My father's small consulting business, already struggling under the weight of Chloe's co-signed loans, collapsed completely. Without income and with massive debts coming due, the bank foreclosed on the house I'd grown up in. The beautiful colonial in the suburbs with its big backyard, where we'd played as children, where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays, was sold at auction. I heard all of this through the grapevine. Mutual acquaintances who didn't know the full story would mention in passing that they'd seen my parents packing a moving truck, or that Chloe was working 3 jobs trying to make ends meet. Some people, knowing I'd inherited money from my grandmother, asked me pointedly why I wasn't helping my family in their time of need. I stopped answering those questions after a while. The people who mattered understood. The people who didn't matter, I stopped caring about their opinions. My mother sent letters, long rambling letters that started with anger and slowly evolved into something that almost resembled accountability. She wrote about going to therapy, about finally recognizing the patterns that had destroyed our family. She wrote about my father's depression, about how the loss of everything had broken something in him. She wrote about Chloe going to Gamblers Anonymous, actually committing to treatment this time. I read the letters but didn't respond. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. The guilt came in waves. Some days I was fine, convinced I'd made the right choice. Other days I woke up at 3 a.m, my heart racing, wondering if I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving. I thought about that house being sold, about my parents having to move into a small apartment in a rough neighborhood, about Chloe's hollow, desperate face at that meeting. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, helped me work through the complex tangle of emotions. She reminded me over and over that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, that protecting myself wasn't selfish, that I deserved to build a life that wasn't constantly being drained by other people's poor choices. You didn't cause their problems, Dr. Chen would say during our sessions. You didn't create Chloe's addiction. You didn't force your parents to enable her. You didn't make them forge your signature. Those were their choices. You're only responsible for your own choices. But I could have helped them, I would argue. I had the money. I could have paid off the debt, saved the house. And then what? Dr. Chen would counter. In 2 years, when Chloe gambled again, when the debts piled up again, would you pay again? When would it stop? Where would you draw the line? She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are 2 very different things. 6 months after that confrontation in Sterling's office, something unexpected happened. I was leaving my office after a long day of work when I saw a familiar figure standing by my car. For a moment, my heart stopped, and my hand went to my phone, ready to call security. But it wasn't Marco. It wasn't my father. It was Chloe. She looked different, thinner, older, worn down by months of working multiple jobs and attending daily GA meetings. Her clothes were clean but shabby. Her hair, once glossy and professionally styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She stood at exactly 501 feet away, just outside the restraining order's boundary, her hands shoved deep in her pockets. We stared at each other across the parking lot for a long moment. I waited for the anger, the fear, the resentment, but all I felt was a deep, aching sadness. She raised one hand in a tentative wave, and I saw her mouth form words, "I'm sorry." I didn't wave back, but I didn't look away either. I stood there feeling the weight of everything that had passed between us, everything that could never be repaired, everything that might someday somehow be forgiven. Then she turned and walked away, and I got in my car and drove home. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to my apartment, I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what had just happened. That night, I called Dr. Chen, even though it wasn't our scheduled session day. She looked broken, I told her, like she'd been beaten down by life. And I felt, God, I don't even know what I felt. Sad, relieved, guilty, all of it at once. That's normal, Dr. Chen said. You can feel compassion for someone's suffering while still maintaining boundaries. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. But what if she really has changed, I asked. What if she's actually getting better and I'm being too stubborn to give her a chance? Changed how much? Dr. Chen asked. She's been sober from gambling for 6 months. That's good, that's a start. But recovery from addiction is a years-long process, not a months-long one. And more importantly, showing up outside your workplace, even if she stayed outside the restraining order's boundary, is still a boundary violation. If she'd really changed, she would have respected your space completely. I hadn't thought of it that way. So what do I do? You keep doing what you're doing, Dr. Chen said. You keep protecting yourself. You keep building your life. And if someday far in the future they demonstrate genuine lasting change, then you can revisit whether you want any kind of relationship with them. But that's your choice to make on your timeline, not theirs. 3 months after that encounter, I received another letter. This one was different from the others. It was from my mother, but it was short, direct, without any of the usual manipulation or guilt-tripping. Dear Ava, it read, I'm not writing to ask for anything or to try to change your mind about the boundaries you've set. I'm writing because I need you to know that we're in therapy, all of us. Your father and I see a marriage counselor twice a week. Chloe is in intensive treatment for her gambling addiction. We're trying to understand the patterns that destroyed our family. We're trying to be better people. I don't expect you to forgive us. I don't even expect you to respond to this letter, but I wanted you to know that we're working on ourselves. Not because we think it will win you back, but because it's what we should have done years ago. I'm sorry for everything. I know that's not enough, but it's all I have. Love, Mom. I read that letter maybe 50 times over the next week. I showed it to Dr. Chen. I asked Sterling to verify whether they were actually in therapy, and his investigator confirmed that yes, they were attending regular sessions with licensed professionals. I still didn't respond, but I kept the letter. I put it in a box with my grandmother's letter and the video statement. Pieces of my family's story preserved but not necessarily acted upon. A year after my grandmother's death, I stood in front of 30 teenagers at a community center in the Bronx, teaching them about financial boundaries using a pizza diagram. This is your income, I said, pointing to the 8 slices I'd drawn. Each slice has a purpose. The key is making sure you're the one who decides what that purpose is. A 16-year-old girl raised her hand. But Miss Mitchell, what if your family needs help? My mom takes money from my part-time job. She says family comes first. Do I just say no? The question hit me hard. I saw myself in her, young and desperate to be a good daughter, not yet understanding that giving everything left you with nothing. There's a difference between helping and being taken advantage of, I said carefully. Is your family asking you to chip in occasionally? Or are they planning their budget around your part-time job? Because if it's the latter, that's not fair to you. Another kid raised his hand. But what if they get mad? What if they say you're selfish? Then they're manipulating you, I said bluntly. Real love doesn't demand that you sacrifice yourself. Real love wants you to thrive. You have to guard your pizza, because if you give away every slice, you'll starve. I saw recognition in several faces. These kids barely old enough to have jobs were already being used as ATMs. After class, students stayed to share their stories. One girl cried about her mother's drug addiction and feeling guilty for wanting to save for college. One boy talked about his father demanding his entire paycheck. Story after story of financial abuse disguised as family obligation. I gave them resources, strategies for setting boundaries, phone numbers for counseling services. I told them that wanting to protect themselves didn't make them bad children. When the last student left, I sat alone and cried. For them, for my younger self, for the family I'd lost even though losing them had been necessary for survival. This community center was the first location of what would become the Eleanor Mitchell Financial Literacy Center. My grandmother would have been proud. 2 months later, I received a letter from Chloe that changed everything. Dear Ava, it began. I'm writing this in my GA meeting with my sponsor, making sure I actually say what I need to say instead of manipulating you like I usually do. I've been sober from gambling for 14 months. I have a full-time job as a waitress and a part-time job at a grocery store. I live in a studio apartment with a roommate. I take the bus everywhere. My life is small and hard and nothing like what I thought it would be, and I'm grateful for it. Because for the first time, I'm facing reality. I'm paying my own bills, I'm taking responsibility for my choices, and I'm starting to understand what I did to you, what we all did to you. You were never the golden child, you were the scapegoat. We made you responsible for our happiness, our stability, our problems. We took everything you gave and demanded more. And when you finally said no, we tried to steal from you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know that I understand now. I understand why Grandma left everything to you. I understand why you had to cut us off. And I understand that I destroyed our relationship. Not you, me. I'm working on being a better person. Not so you'll take me back, but because I need to live with myself. I hope you're happy, Ava. I hope you're building a good life. You deserve it. You always deserved it. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy drowning in my own shit. I'm sorry for everything. From the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. Your sister, Chloe. I read that letter on my couch with my rescue cat beside me, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the possibility of forgiveness. Someday, maybe. I called Dr. Chen.